I am Jamie Rosenthal. This is Roots Down a Regenerative AF Podcast. I have an amazing guest, a new friend from across the pond, Harry Waters. Tell the audience a little bit about yourself and your background. And you're an Englishman in Spain, so there's got to be a good story behind that.
Oh, well, actually, incidentally, there is quite a good story behind it. I also like bridges, and when I was traveling the world many years ago, back when I had hair, 3,000 years ago, I was working in a district of Rio in Brazil, and between my classes, I didn't have much. There wasn't much there except a big shopping mall, as you'd call it. I'd call it a shopping centre, but potato. And I went in there and I read this book all about bridges, and I saw that there was a single-sided suspension bridge here in Seville. And I said to myself, one day I think I'll probably go there. And then I subsequently moved. I lived in China, I lived in Vietnam, I lived in Australia. And then I thought, I want to go back to Europe. Where should I go? Well, there's that bridge that I always wanted to see. So I moved here, and that was 14 years ago.
Oh my God. All because of
really good bridge. Really good. Yeah, I can actually see it from my bathroom now, which is a bit of a dream come true. Yeah. I also met my wife here, and we had a child. Well, she had a child. I was involved, but a lot less than her at the birth part. Yeah. That was another reason for staying. A pretty good reason, more than just a bridge.
Awesome. So you landed in Spain, which is amazing, which I bragged that I got to go to Spain last year, and it was the best trip I've ever taken in my life. Barcelona was, I think, the most magical city I've ever been to. I absolutely loved it.
It is wonderful and fascinating.
I feel like it's full of vampires.
It's full of something.
It's very gothic, and I loved it. The food, the culture. So yeah, I want to press a little bit into what the work you do now. Like fast forward to the work you do now, and really why we share such good commonality and common ground. I'm one of those Americans that believe in climate change. I represent the truth. So I just, want to let people know what the work you do, and I think it's just super fascinating, and I think it is super necessary, and dare I say, probably not ever going to happen in classrooms, where we're ripping out DEI and, inclusivity and all those things. Like, we're not going to ever teach climate change in the classroom. But how do you do it? So tell the audience what you do.
Well, that's a big question.
I know.
And before I jump into that, it's funny you mentioned about, climate change believers and deniers and such. I haven't met very many here in Europe, but I did meet one the other day, and we were having a conversation, and he said to me, oh, Harry, don't talk to me about that climate change stuff. I don't believe in it. And I just turned to him and said, well, that's okay then. Just don't talk to me about Tuesdays. I don't believe in Tuesdays, but they definitely exist. But just don't talk to me about them. And he kind of looked at me stunned. So that I found that as a pretty good way to, because engaging with that doesn't usually get you very far.
Right.
It usually gets you quite angry. And I found that out quite a long time ago. So I tried to avoid that kind of conflict, and try and take the positivity that we can find within all this darkness, and I try and take that into classrooms. I do lots of workshops in schools where we intertwine, we combine sustainability and English. So we have classes on English using sustainability, or on sustainability using English. We do workshops with students from K through to 12. But we also work with teachers, because, the ultimate change maker has to be, somebody who can spread those ideas. And some teachers are still widely respected in the classrooms. And I noticed that, my students were listening to me when I talked about different things to do with the climate crisis. and they were taking it in, and the way I presented it was, yes, there are not great things happening, but there are positive things that we can do. And if we look at those things that we can do, then we'll all feel an awful lot better about it. If we are taking action, if we are taking positive steps, then we will feel better. And I try and help students, but also teachers and publishers as well, for that matter. I try and help them get their students to connect with these different ideas, because not everybody's interested in the same thing of the climate crisis. It's a poly crisis. It isn't just, it isn't just CO2 levels rising. It isn't just biodiversity loss. There's so many things that are intertwined. You mentioned DEI before. There's, you've got to look at racial justice within this. You've got to look at gender equality. There are so many different things. So what I try and do is simplify those ideas for teachers so they can then find what's relevant to their students. Because if you've got a class of, let's say, 25 kids, there are factions within there. So finding what they're interested in is the absolute key for me. And that's where it being a poly crisis helps, because there's something for everyone.
Right. I wonder, one of the things I consistently say is, how do we make the climate crisis the common thread or the commonality that we're trying to solve together? If we were to go back several hundred years or a couple hundred years, we would find that people cared more because they were more connected to the earth. Like most people were growing their own food. They had their own livestock. Whether you were a doctor or a scientist or a lawyer, you still were subsistent in that you were growing your own food. So there was that connectivity. But now that connectivity has been lost. And I find most children, it's scary here in America, especially, they don't know where food comes from. They think blueberries grow underground. I mean, I remember one kid said that, oh, I thought blueberries were a vegetable. Or I'm like, what? Like, you don't even know if you don't know the common basic things. So I just find that if we can bring people together, hopefully under that one premise of that this is one issue that we all need to solve. We can solve it in our own ways. We could solve it, differently from different perspectives. So we talked about this before. So tell me, how is this perceived I'm curious about the teachers almost more than I am the students. Like, how is this perceived for the teachers? Are they like, wow, we are hungry for this knowledge. We want to know how to do this. How well perceived is this program?
I'll tell you what, that is, again, another great question, because here in Spain it's very different to other countries. I work a lot with some amazing teachers in Turkey and incredible teachers in Poland and also in India. But when it comes to those teachers, they tend to kind of gravitate towards this. So when I'm speaking to them, it's like, preaching to the choir. Now, these are people that want these ideas. They want it. So they're like, can you help me with this? Or can you help me with that? Whereas when I sometimes go into, a classroom here or a staff room here, there's sometimes that initial pushback because we don't have time. How do we examine this? How is this relevant to English? And I think that last question is my favorite, because how is it not relevant to English? It's relevant to everything. Whatever you're teaching, whether you're teaching English, math, geography, science, PE, whatever it is, the planet, the place where we live is relevant, because without it, you don't have any of those other things. You cannot. So helping people find that commonality. And there's one great way that I love to do it, and I'm sure you'll like this one. And the first thing I ever do when I go to do sessions and so on and so forth, I always take in a plant that they can just have. So there's your first plant. And, they look at you a bit like, what are you doing? And the first chapter in my book is all about having a plant, because the first step is understanding that we are connected to nature and what we do affects nature. And if they have a plant in their classroom and they leave it and they neglect it, they can watch it die. They can see it sitting there. It doesn't matter how resilient it is. If you don't pay any attention to a plant, eventually it's going to die. Or they can watch it thrive. Or they can buy two and we'll see how one of them thrives when you treat it properly and one of them doesn't when you don't. Like, there are so many different things that we can do there. And then when it comes to the time argument, I understand that we don't have enough time. Nobody has enough time to do anything. I hardly ever change my underwear. There just isn't time. That's a lie. That's a lie. I have been known to change my underwear. There is time to change underwear.
Time.
Yeah. So it comes to showing teachers how they can integrate these ideas of sustainable learning and sustainability into their lessons, how they can find those minutes, because it doesn't have to be about wholesale changes to the entire curriculum. Would I like that? Oh, heck yeah, I would love that. But at the moment, we don't have that. What we do have are people on the ground, people in the classroom who we can give the tools to, and they can then take it out and they can spread that message, because that message will go to their students. And not all of the students will take it home, but some of them will. And then that will go to the parents. And then that will spread on. And, even if you only plant the seed in 2 of your students, that will grow within a very short space of time to 10 or 15 people. So imagine if you can do it for 25 kids. Bam.
So I don't know if you are familiar with there's a comedian that is very well known in the States. His name is George Carlin.
Oh, yes, of course.
Okay.
He was wonderful.
I talk about this all the time because I think that, if he was around and I could work with him, I would ask him to create a children's book. Because he talked about planetary health in a very different way. He said that, talked about the climate crisis as the planet doesn't need us. We need it. Yeah. And, he talked about, he did this whole impression where he crouches down. He's like, this planet will shake us off like a dog with fleas, and it'll move on. It'll keep on fucking trucking. I'm like, yeah. So I find your experiment really interesting in that we don't realize that through millions of years of evolution, we have created the planet that we need. Like, we need I don't even want to get into the fossil fuels, but we need agriculture. Without the agriculture, us needing food, we wouldn't have created monstrous pears and peaches, and those things would have been tiny little things. But through our love of the planet and our love of creating something from the planet that we need to eat to nourish our bodies, and how we have grown as a civilization has been our connection to nature. Without that, we're effed. But nature doesn't care. It's going to create food for birds and for other plants, and it's going to do its, so like taking a plant in the classroom, I think teaches us that if we do not care, especially if it's a food plant, we don't get to eat. If we don't care and that plant dies, we don't get to eat. And that could be catastrophic, I often say that. That's why I commented on LinkedIn. I was like, God, that is such a beautiful lesson. Like, it's like, like I would almost like see a classroom of kids like with their cherry tomatoes. I almost said tomatoes. When I hear another English person speak, their cherry tomato plants, and all the like other kids that have tended their plant are snacking on their cherry tomatoes, and you've got a couple lonely kids in the classroom that have forgotten because they have their Game Boys or their Switches in their hand, and they forgot to water their plant, and they're sad because they're not getting to enjoy their cherry tomatoes. So
I did it with spider plants with my group last year. So we propagated our own spider plant. So we all had one. Then we all made our own plant pot, obviously with upcycled materials. And I haven't taught these students now for about 18 months, and I still occasionally get a photo sent through from a parent in an email saying, look, the plant's still growing. And it's just like, yes, you see, there's a seed that's been planted. Okay, that person might not go off and, save the world, as he says with very inverted commas, but they'll think more, about things that plants need. And you mentioned before, the earth doesn't need us. And we always talk about saving the planet, but in saving the planet, what we're actually doing is saving humanity. Because if we don't save the planet, it will just be, 2,000 billionaires living in their bunkers for as long as they can, and then goodbye to everything, and then the Earth will start all over again, and the Earth will regenerate. And that's not what we want. That's not ideal.
No, I mean, we've put all this effort into having kids, and I believe creating really great innovations in science and agriculture, and God, I mean, it could be just so abundant.
Yeah.
And it's just, and these are the questions that you get as your kid gets older. And you said your daughter's 11. What's her name? I'm sorry.
Alethea.
That's beautiful. My daughter Sophia, over the last year or so, asks these like huge, big questions of like, what's to happen if we have another pandemic and it's catastrophic, and oh my God, like, is RFK Jr. going to be able to handle something like this? He's a vaccine denier, and she's asking these big questions, these big, huge questions, and I'm like, oh damn, like, now that's the next generation. That's the generation that is going to inherit this earth very soon, and she's seeing us make really piss poor decisions that are going to affect her and her children. And I don't know, I'm hopeful in that there's a lot of work to do, and it's you wake up in the morning and it's not like, oh, we've solved this problem, like climate change has been solved and world hunger has been solved. Imagine the feeling you would get. But no, the work keeps going, and I think in a lot of ways the work is miserable to work on, because these issues of these billionaires perpetuating the problems that will keep them relevant.
Just a moment ago, so you were talking about this is the Earth that our children are going to hopefully it'll be better, that they will be here for. This is the Earth that we are borrowing from them, I think is the old proverb. They don't inherit it, we borrow it. But also, it's the Earth that we still have to live on. Like, I'm 40 years old. I know I don't look a day over 39 and a half. I'm 40 years old. I hope to be around for like a minimum of another 30 years. Like, I'm talking minimum. I want to be here at least until I'm 70, if not 80. I want to be actually like my grandma, who's up to 90 now. So that's 50 years in the future. So yes, it's going to be the Earth that our kids inherit, but it's also the one that we've got to live on. And being selfish and living in Seville, I really don't like it when the thermometer hits, I'm going to speak in European now, 46 degrees Celsius. Now, for American listeners, you can probably find out what that is in Fahrenheit. I can even look on my magical mobile telephone, which will tell me as well. But I don't like living in that. So it's
above 100, right?
Oh, it's definitely above 100. It's definitely above 100. But yeah, as a selfish person, I don't want to live in that. So it's not just our children's future. It's our future as well. And it's 114.8 degrees Fahrenheit, by the way.
Holy shit! That's as hot as some of the valley in California gets. Death Valley in California gets. Yeah. That's insane. And that really, your perspective on that means that the poor decisions and policy decisions we make here in America affect you. It affects your beautiful paradise.
But
you're
once those decisions are made by, a world superpower, suddenly other places feel like maybe it's not such a terrible idea to do what they're doing. And you see other policies following that kind of awful far right way that is coming out there. And it I don't want to say it normalizes it, because it doesn't normalize it, but it makes some people think that it's okay. It isn't okay.
Yeah, it's not. Well, it's far from okay. And just speaking to the global population that will, we'll have people from Spain hopefully listening to this podcast. I am not one of them. There's many people. I'd say over 50%. I'd say well over 50%. I think a lot of people just didn't vote. that really are not happy with the way things are going and don't think that we're moving the needle far enough, fast enough, and pushing, climate action to the degree that we want to see it. And I find that even if like, the work's going to keep on happening, whether we're in the Paris Climate Accord or not. But it sure would be great for America to be there. Didn't I hear recently though that some billionaire was going to foot the bill for us to be in the Paris Climate Accord? There was some kind of intervention there. I'll have to look up the facts on that. Maybe we'll do some little fact checking stuff.
Gotta be Taylor Swift. She's the nice billionaire, right? That's
God.
That's how...
I just don't believe. I really don't believe in billionaires. I mean, even
I'm so against billionaires.
I think it is. It's awful. I mean, it's when you break down the math. I don't know if you've ever seen. There's a video where it shows it in rice grains about how much money that is, and it depicts each rice grain as $10,000 or something. And this is what the average person will have, and this is what like the billionaires is like. It's like a sack of rice, and I'm like, I mean, way larger. The disparity is so huge, and it's like that is more than generational wealth. That's a power grab, and that's keeping people in poverty. And if people can't see that, you're duped. You're absolutely duped. Like it's not.
Well, there are so many things out there, like if you saw a monkey taking all of the bananas and watched all the other monkeys starve, you'd say that it was brutal. But a billionaire does it, and they're a genius. If you count to a million, it will take you 11 minutes. If you count to a billion, it will take you, is it 33 years or something like that?
Yeah. I mean, we came up with almost the same number, but it's 30 something years. Like
it's a whole lot of time, and that's just 1 billion. Like that's not even any more billions after that.
I think there should be a world military that disbands, takes the money from all the billionaires and puts it into global health, global wellness, and feeding people. And I think most problems on this planet would be solved.
There would be enough money. There'd be enough money to solve it.
Yeah. I mean, there would be another, you cut a head off of the dragon, there's another head that's going to grow back, that sort of thing. So who knows, but wishful thinking.
But I like the thing you say about feeding the hungry as well, and this is another thing that I try to work really hard on, and this is the idea of food waste. Because
let's take a quick break to thank our sponsors. I want to first say thank you to our legacy sponsor, AGSA. Thank you so much for helping us kick this whole thing off. Our new sponsors this year, Sunseeker Tools. They make electric tools for the landscaping industry, so no more noisy blowers and no more gasoline smells. Thank you so much, Sunseeker, for doing the work. Yes, some builders and developers have gotten into the fight for climate action. Thank you so much, Will Johnson at the MicroLife Institute. MicroLife Institute, less space, more life. Developments can be climate friendly. Check them out. Another builder getting in the game, Thomas Billups from Billups Homes. Billups Homes is the real deal. Building beautiful homes here that are helping fight climate change. Learn more about Billups Homes. Check out the great work and keep it up. And thank you for sponsoring season 2.
There is already plenty of food for hungry people to eat. There's more than enough food. There's way more than enough food for hungry people to eat. But it's just not distributed properly, or hungry people don't have the means to be able to spend that amount of money. I don't eat meat. I'm a vegan, and so a huge portion of my diet is vegetables. Vegetables and legumes and stuff like that. They're very, very expensive. Like, it's very expensive to go to the store and buy enough veg to fill you up. Obviously, it goes with rice or quinoa or whatever, but it's very difficult. It's an awful lot easier to go and spend €3 on a pack of chicken fingers. Like, also, chickens don't have fingers. Like, what? So chicken fingers. Yeah, I know. Chicken fingers. Always confuses me. So yeah, that we have the means for it there. We have the food there for people, but it's cheaper for supermarkets to throw that food away than give it to the needy. And it's to me, that's criminal.
There's a number that I heard in the States, 40% of all food grown will be thrown in the trash. Is that pretty standard for Europe or even?
I think the stat here is about 30% is the one that I've seen.
Wow, 10%. I mean, that's
and there are different views of where that goes missing. And one of the huge things I saw recently was 1,500 kilograms of zucchini are thrown away every day because they're not the right shape. It's just like, really? That's an awful lot of zucchini soup you can make there.
It's really bad. When we here in the States, they don't realize, I think that they haven't connected the dots. And luckily I work with a really rad commissioner who we have like, I'm wearing the shirt, I'll represent the DeKalb County Green New Deal. Think global, act local.
Absolutely.
Yes, I get to work with some really great people, and Commissioner Ted Terry is awesome. A lot of our discussions is around food waste and its relationship. We have a landfill here. I'm sure you have them in Spain. And what they haven't realized, they haven't correlated that there's a correlation to the amount of food waste that's going into their landfill. They have to maintain their landfill to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars, right? These landfills don't just maintain themselves. You don't dump the food in a hole. It's, you got to let off gases. You got to do all these crazy things. There's thermophilic and biophilic, like all this stuff happening, right? But cities and municipalities and government hasn't really realized like the food waste problem is their problem. It ends up landing in their lap to try to figure out. So if they could solve it, if they could be, instead of being reactive, they could be proactive and figure it out earlier on. Like, oh, we have a food waste issue. Like we're running a pilot right now that's for like residents. But I believe that all municipalities could take this seriously and say, food waste, well, whatever we have in food waste, let's grow healthy soil so that we can like make our soils better, that can better help our water system to clean our water, because we pay a shitload of money in cleaning our water and stormwater runoff and all that. So like it's all connected, but like there's no real follow through in conversation. I wonder if there's any conversation in Spain about those interconnectivities.
Not anywhere near enough. Not anywhere near enough. I mean, the idea of sustainability in general is a fairly fresh one, which is it's a horrible thing to say. And even within the industry that I spend a lot of my time in the English language industry, so English as a second language, English as a foreign language, whatever you'd like to call it, there's so much like virtue signaling from publishers where they'll say, this is the SDG that we're working on. And they'll look at one. And then they'll go through the book and that will all be related to the one SDG. Now, don't get me wrong. I love the SDGs as a tool, as an educator. They show students so clearly so many different issues. But what they also show is that interconnectivity. And it's so important that publishers and schools and teachers don't just go down that route of saying, well, exercise is good health and well-being. No poverty is all about houses. No hunger is all about food waste. It's like, no, they are all absolutely 100% interconnected. I mean, the only one that maybe isn't is decent work and economic growth. Not really sure how economic growth works with sustainability, because it's all about growing and sustain is all about sustaining. But, this isn't a podcast about degrowth economics or, a circular economy, but they are topics that you can talk about with your students, and some of your students will be super interested in that side of things. Because when we look at change makers, people always think activist. And when people think activist, the immediate thought goes to, an angry Gen Z person screaming and holding up a placard, which I think absolutely has its place, is absolutely necessary, but it isn't the only type of activism. It isn't the only type of change making. And every single person has change making in their DNA. And it's just a matter of unlocking it.
But I think we've gotten to a point that feels like the only thing we can do is scream at the top of our lungs.
And we need to. We need to keep screaming as well. Like, that has to happen. But then, in a classroom, as I mentioned, there will be the students that won't ever want to scream. But they turn out to be incredible inventors, so that's that thing of finding that passion for those students. I'm sure you've worked with so many young people that had never even thought of, planting a cherry tomato. That had never occurred to them. But as soon as they get their hands in the soil, as soon as they have that connection with the earth, suddenly it's just like, this is incredible. I can create life. I have just, made life happen. When you plant something from seed to fruit, when you have that, it's just better. And there are so many. It's so easy to help people find those passions.
Well, that's one of the things. So we talked about this before, and I've been in urban agriculture for a long time, and I am a proponent of it. I do believe in it, but I will say this. One of the things that happens in urban ag is that it is a lowly farmer on their farm. They're too poor to pay their bills. They bring all their wares to the farmer's market. They sell it to all the rich people that could afford to go to the market, other markets, and buy their food. There's no connectivity. And that's one of the reasons why in my work, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to actually bleed the farm out into the urban area. So we can see this abundance that we talk about. Instead of people mowing and blowing and grass and areas, we can see fruit trees and pollinators and bees and all this shit happening in front of us, and it'll teach us to respect it and have reverence and understand how to connect to it a little bit better. But if it's all locked, I have this visual idea of like if a farm is all locked in a box somewhere hidden away in an urban area, nobody gets to see that and understand that that's important.
Yeah, and then the other thing is so tasting the stuff that you grow is great. That's one wonderful thing. Someone else tasting the stuff that you've grown, that's a whole next level altogether. So I used to have an allotment back in the UK, and I grew strawberries. And I remember taking a friend up to the allotment before sunrise, when the strawberries were just coming out, and saying, you need to try these fresh strawberries before the sun has risen, when they're at their absolute sweetest. And just seeing the look on his face when he ate this strawberry, just like, it was magical. Like no strawberry that he'd ever eaten before in his whole entire life. Now, this was 22 years ago, and I've still got that image. I don't speak to that friend anymore. We've drifted apart, like, very much. But I've still got that image of his face. And that whole idea of, working on something together and sharing this something, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to do this with the planet. I saw a post recently condemning eco-zealots. These eco-zealots. And I just thought, damn these eco-zealots, out there fighting tooth and nail for a better world for everyone, because it is for everyone. This is, we want to create a better world. I want there to be a healthier planet for the billionaires. I want there to be a healthier planet for people who support Tottenham Hotspur Football Club, which is the opposite club to the team that I support, by the way. I want everybody to have a nicer world. Like, it's just the way it is because of that whole strawberry reaction. When you do something good for other people, it feels good.
I want the audience to know about the work you do and lift you up. You have a book that we need to make sure that we plug.
I've got it in my hand now. I've got it right here. Ha!
Activities for a Greener Mindset. I love it. Love it.
There you go. And it's a basic guide for teachers to help their students go from climate zero to planet hero.
I love it.
And as I say, the first unit is all about a plant in your classroom.
Well, I want to thank you again for your time. I'm going to say to all my listeners, if you guys like this sort of thing, Roots Down, a Regenerative AF podcast, we are all about bringing sustainability and that conversation about regenerative earth care planet-wide, right? Planet-wide.
Oh,
so
yeah.